What is the aspect of experience that you want to be able to speak to?
Well, right. Well, it's this very thing that you were starting into with your paper, Making Sense of Spirituality. We want to be able to account for what this is all about, what people have been talking about in this
mystical
realm,
experience.
in mystical
Yeah.
experience. And yes, we want to try to come as far as we can to do that from the science game,
Right.
while acknowledging that the limitations of language and so forth may make it impossible to totally be able to describe it. But we want to get it seems to me to be important to try to get as much of it as we possibly can, and because you're after a full account of human experience. That's your claim, where you're trying to go. I forget the language in that. I wrote it down.
On the 500-year agenda.
Yeah. You
1,000-year
want a
agenda.
model that speaks to the full range of human experience.
Exactly.
A part of which is this, apparently, this mystical experience.
Yeah. Well, and as you know, the work started there. The very, very first paper is on that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm with you that if you're going to account for human complexity, you can't X out the mystical and maintain contact with human experience. I mean, it's and if you think about so many things that are in our culture, start there.
Yeah.
I mean, the spiritual and religious traditions universally start there.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost universally.
Yeah.
These people who sort of come forward and say, hey,
Yeah.
they've had mystical experiences.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that.
And then that becomes sort of transformed by other aspects of primate behavior, dominance and warfare, and all of that in very destructive ways, and so then that
and maybe language and this issue of
in language,
ontologizing.
yeah, exactly, and yes, exactly, and the way that language is built on divisions of things. I mean, that's how it's built.
Yeah,
So to try to describe what's not divided, which is the non-dual, undivided, those kind of languaging, not to all of that inherently can't be described by language.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Well, which is where you get, my ex had a phrase for it, which is true knowledge is saying less and less about more and more.
Yes, exactly.
But along that path,
then you're saying nothing about everything.
Ultimately, nothing about everything. Ultimately, silence is the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
There's that story told of Cratylus who connected to that space, and as he slid down, his final lecture was this. That was it.
Yeah, that's nice.
And you can see it. You're like, watch out. Because the very first word out of your mouth, the chopping block has been pulled out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which is what, like mysticism has had a hard time being a basis of scientific work because, it's about dividing and combining, not just dividing and combining. But when you combine to the one, you have to include even your talk about the one, and then there you are.
There you are. That's right. Right.
The conundrum.
And so science has, has kind of developed out of an experience of being oppressed by religious authorities. I mean, any number of scientists have been killed for doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
But it also occurred to me this morning that any number of mystics have also been killed. Back to Jesus, and a long stream of people who actually step into this and make a claim of about what is. Yeah. So I was realizing that it's not the scientists and the mystics who are at odds. It's both are sort of been persecuted by people who get fused with language and the power of that, but I think we've got to look into what it is about self as context, which tends to inspire the kind of certainty and conviction that whatever people touch it, kind of inflates their sort of egoic verbal processes.
That's really a good question. I like that question. Like, what is it about the experience of the transcendent or oneness or whatever, however you want to language about it. That creates a space in which certainty can reside.
Yeah. Well, and so, I found myself this morning sketching out another 5 qualities, besides the 4 that you're speaking to and making sense.
Yeah.
But one of them I'm provisionally calling certainty. And it's the sense that glasses would be good. I'm not sure I can make it out. So what I wrote this morning was, it's another one of the qualities of a full emergence of self as context, recognizing itself as what it's always been. Now that's the feel of it, though.
Right,
and in fact, you say exactly that on page 96 of Get Out of Your Mind. Thus, we are neither trying to establish something, nor to discover something. It is more as though we are trying to remember something we know full well, like remembering a song you've been humming in the back of your mind for years. So you're speaking to that there. But, so anyway, there is this sort of hyper-real quality to that experience. And actually I want to talk about some of your near-death experiences, because I know you've touched that. But it's for this reason that this is called awakening, in contrast to dreaming. Dreaming there's somebody in here, and there, all this, all this stuff, So it's the hyper-reality quotient of quality that, and so that's somewhere in the conviction thing that people tap into.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a quality of recognition, or the so-ness of it has been lurking or something.
Yeah, but it is undeniable when we experience it.
Right.
I mean, it's just obvious, and everything just gets kind of swept away.
Well, undeniable, and there's this quality I think of as if you're reconnecting or something.
Yes.
Children have a sense of this, and there's something that is, like lurking in the background, that consciousness itself contains some of the elements that are manifestly so when you're participating in an experience that is whole.
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about this.
Well, it's very hard to talk about this. But so anyway, back to this sort of the arising of ontological claims.
Okay.
And the obnoxiousness of that. Yeah, it comes out of this but it's really such a double-edged sword. And so people start saying, they're talking as if they're talking about truth with a capital T.
Right.
You go Satchitananda, so you got being. Sat is truth. So they're saying this is this is another word. Is sort of what's true.
Yes.
And that's the experience of it.
Right.
But when you translate it into language, then you start to slide into trouble, and next thing you know, you're knocking on somebody's door trying to get them to join the Jehovah's Witnesses or the church of your choice or the non-dual club, or me showing up with a lurking desire to have ACT people get interested in this, taking this next step.
Right.
It's a primate thing, apparently.
Some of it maybe. But there's also, I'm with you on that. There's something in here that's, I wonder if the truth, there's the kind of analytical or categorical truth, there's the truth of, experience itself, like the felt sense of something.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no utility to questioning that, really.
Right.
And where would that go if you did, am I really breathing now? Am I, that seems...
Yeah.
So maybe it's not so special in a way, in the sense that any experience has an element of it that is real or true, right? I think what's different about these is there's no edges to the experience.
Exactly. Yeah, from the inside. Yeah.
From the inside out, it's boundless.
Yeah.
Because that is the experience. I mean, not that as a description, but
right.
It's,
No, but
it's unusual precisely because
yes,
time, place, and even person dissolves.
Exactly. It's not relevant there.
Not relevant. Yeah. And that's different. I mean, I feel it there, but I don't feel it here. Is different than experience that challenges the edges, challenges the thingness of experience.
Yeah.
The thing-like quality. Things require distinction, and this is an experience without distinction.
Yeah, and that distinction is so useful as a tool. Why we're at the top of the food chain, and so of course we're going to be very involved with that.
Right.
But it's a whole question of whether.
But if it's possible, this element of so-ness that's in experience itself.
Yes.
Is actually not different. It's just that the experience we're talking about is.
Yes. I get that. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. And now, actually, in passing, another quality of this self as context is you just said that it's not a personal thing. We talked about the sense that what's aware over there is fundamentally the same as what's aware over here.
Right.
And that there isn't a Steve to be found in there or a Michael to be found in here. You look for that, you can't find it. It's one of the qualities of it. That there isn't anybody exactly like.
Yeah. The quality of the mystical experience.
Yes.
Includes that. You do look at it a little differently, and I don't want to. It feels almost sacrilegious in a way to do it. But if, for example, if it's actually so that some of these didactic frames of are you here, there, now, then are involved, so that I-ing includes youing, and if you're going to speak about that goofy way, and so in certain spaces, so much radically so that you're not really sure where I begin and you end, and where you just kind of would you help explain maybe some of the quality of that experience?
Yes, I think so. I've drunk the Kool-Aid on that. I mean, it took me about a year and a half to not be offended by those descriptions, but it's actually making sense to me, and that was another thing that I wanted to try to point to in the last part of my article, that I'm getting there on that. I think it's really true that what you guys are looking at is a part of how this is done.
Right.
And that this experience to some degree arises, if you say emerges as a result of verbal interaction or verbal something.
Yeah.
And I think that's really true, although the part of me that kept bridling is that emerges, that's something that I've sort of experienced as having always been here. Now again, that might be a verbalizing of what the experience is of the timelessness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at any rate, I don't want that to be reduced to some.
Right. Well, now that's just a fair objection, and I've bridled myself against the it's merely the part.
Yeah.
That's in most of, and it's part of why people want to use the word like reductionism and things like that,
yes.
Which part of what we're trying to do in the CBS side of things, that thing you talked about of creating a psychology more adequate to challenge the human condition. The 500-year agenda. It's not a claim that we have that.
It's a hope.
It's just a well, and it's
where we're going.
It's where we. It is a hope, but where we want to go. It's a value, really.
It's a value. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The part of that is a rejection on the science side of the minimization of human complexity. And just say it's merely, and some of the behavioral folks have been worst offenders. Love is just reinforcement. I don't even want to have that conversation. I just want to slap the person. What are you talking about? Of course, reinforcement has something to do with lots of behavior, and probably, but
Yeah.
And I think actually, Skinner made some mistakes like that.
Well, I know. We talked about that last time, and then we got to the metaphor about sort of we're arguing about whether an elephant is more like a wall or a rope or a column.
Right.
You know, and so it's a kind of a dialectic. But meanwhile, elephants are simply here.
But now, having said that, just on this thing, like, okay, so let's say we connect with the quality of timelessness, and you quoted back a part that actually said it's as if we're reconnecting with something that we've known all along. And the kind of verbal kind of extension of that is this state has been there always. No, that's not the right way to say it.
Well, I know, yeah, exactly. No, I got you.
But you know,
I got you. We can't say that quite.
That we can't. We can't say that.
We can't say that. That's right.
That goes beyond that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's into a verbal thing.
And there you really do. You just start flirting with this kind of verbal ego thing of, you know,
exactly.
I've discovered something.
And
I know
I'm cool,
something. I can tell you what it is.
Exactly. All of that stuff.
And then next thing you know, we're having religious wars.
Exactly. Exactly. So how? Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
That is one break. One thing I really. Maybe I'm clinging to something. About the ontological part of things.
Yeah.
The ontological part of things seems so liberating to me.
Oh, I
because
totally
I keep
agree.
looping back to what's my purpose. I mean, it's so humbling. You just say, we're just behaving here. We're just talking here. You know, and so all of this stuff is just a tool.
Yeah.
For what? For what? I don't know. For what? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? What's it for?
Okay. Yes and no. And I've got a quibble with that.
Yeah. No. I know you came in with that. So maybe we should go there.
And so the quibble would be, and it's sort of it's kind of sometimes. Let's imagine that our values are sort of like heading east. I mean, that's one of the metaphors you've got. Okay. So the horizon infinitely recedes as you pass goals towards east.
Exactly.
But what if you're going north?
Right.
Because going either north or south, you reach a singularity point where you can't go north anymore. Something shifts. And there, I mean, my sense is that we're also talking about movement into a singularity where a certain point is reached where there's no longer a sense of somebody valuing. The valuing is done, and the choosing is done by the oneness. Now that may be sliding into ontology, but it's
no,
my
I don't think it could be, but
and then I come back out and I can articulate values. But one of my values is to be surrendered to the flow of the largeness, and if
the thought about, of course, north and south don't work like east and west. I've never seen it used this way, and I like it. I really like it a lot. That there are places, values have this kind of extension, but there's also places beyond which nothing else need be said or done.
Exactly.
And the mystical is exactly that. Yeah. It is the singularity.
Yes.
Although it's an interesting kind of thing because, like seeking that, all the teachers seem to do this about that.
Right, yeah.
They all do this about that.
And, yes.
Because they're all come back to,
it's just here.
It's just here, right?
Yeah,
exactly. So if you're trying to get there, well then getting there is not here.
And the paradox, there's a Sufi koan that says, it can't be found by seeking, but only the one who seeks finds. Right. So it's all ultimately the Ouroboros eating its tail.
So could we say it kind of this way back at like
Western this is beautiful. This is the game we got.
Is that there's a place beyond. The place in which, when divisions fall away, when this kind of unitary so-ness that's inherent in human consciousness is present in the same way that's present.
Yes. Yes.
There's nothing else to be said.
Right.
There's nothing else to be done.
Yes.
There's nothing else.
And yet mysteriously it does. And
yes.
you come through the other side, and then you're doing stuff.
After the ecstasy of the laundry.
Exactly.
You fall into, I gotta pee now, or
right.
whatever it is.
Yeah,
There's still change. Still,
the Zen thing is
change is still there because life is that. No change, no life.
Yes.
And yet this experience is changeless.
Yes.
In the sense of there's nothing to be added or subtracted, right?
Yes, and that's
exactly because it's right in that area which divisions are gone, categories.
Right. Yes, and then so I talk in my paper about this past awakening, which is the oneness thing.
Right. There's
the experience of embodiment where you come back into the doing the laundry in this elegant way. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. And there's this recognition. It's what they talk about in the Heart Sutra. This very emptiness is form. This very is emptiness. It's indivisible.
We quote that in that.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.